1981, Canada entered a severe economic recession, the worst since World War II. With the inflation rate rising to 12.5%, the highest in Canadian history, the unemployment rate peaked at 12%, and GDP declining by more than 5%. Canada's economy was on its knees. However, after the recession, Canada experienced 3 decades of economic growth and expansion, the highest in its entire history. The GDP growth rate was the highest among OECD countries, and the government posted budget surpluses every fiscal year. Canada had become a model of fiscal stability. But this success was not to last. In 2022, Canada experienced its highest annual inflation rate in 40 years, reaching 6.8% on the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. Today, the cost of housing has skyrocketed, leaving many Canadians unable to afford homes. Food banks are struggling to keep up with the increasing number of hungry people. And immigrants, once hopeful about their new lives in Canada, are leaving in record numbers. To buy an average home in Canada today, a family needs to earn about $170,000 a year. That number jumps to a staggering $360,000 per year. Compare this to the median family income of around $70,000, and it's clear that buying a home is nearly impossible for most. For many Canadians, owning a home now seems like chasing shadows. But the truth is, it wasn't always like this. In the past, owning a home in Canada was possible for almost everyone. However, in the last few decades, housing prices have increased much faster than wages, crushing the dreams of many citizens. Nevertheless, not everyone dreams of owning a home. Many people are happy with renting instead. However, renting has become just as difficult as buying a home in Canada. This is due to several factors, like not having enough homes being built, the "not in my backyard" or NIMBY attitude, the growing population, and complicated government rules. These issues have caused a severe shortage in rental housing. Across Canada, the vacancy rate for rentals is 1.5%, the lowest level since CMHC began recording a national vacancy rate in 1988. This means very few places are available for rent, and people are struggling to find a place to live. Every time an apartment is listed, it receives hundreds of applications, making the competition fierce. Many renters are left feeling desperate and hopeless. The situation has become so dire that people are forced to choose between paying rent to keep a roof over their heads or paying for essentials like electricity and food because they can't afford both. Low vacancy rates have led to skyrocketing rental prices. Landlords, aware that renters have limited options, continue to raise rents to get as much money as possible. In Vancouver, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is around $3,000, making it the third most expensive city in the world for renting a one-bedroom apartment, behind only Hong Kong and San Francisco. After paying taxes and rent, many Canadians find it hard to make ends meet. People are skipping meals, working multiple jobs, or even living in their cars just to survive. Debt has become a necessary part of life, and Canada now has the third highest household debt-to-GDP ratio in the world. Some argue that the significant increase in real estate prices is partly due to the government's immigration policy. In 2021, immigrants made up 23% of Canada's total population, the highest proportion of any G7 country. As if that's not enough, there are over 1 million foreign students in the country. This sudden population growth has put a huge strain on the already limited housing market. Most immigrants and students are looking for entry-level homes and apartments, which puts extra pressure on the housing market for average Canadians and young people to try to find a starter home. However, immigration is not the only reason for rising housing prices. Canada has underinvested in housing for decades. CIBC estimates that Canada needs 5 million more homes by 2030 to make housing affordable. However, developers say this is impossible because you can't just build homes overnight. Local governments in Canada have been reluctant to invest in housing development. Homeowners often oppose new developments because they fear it will lower their property values. And NIMBYism frequently challenges large projects. Elected officials aware of the opposition avoid pushing for housing developments to keep their voter base happy and secure their positions. Moreover, various taxes imposed by cities and provinces increase the cost and time required for development. In some cities, these taxes can add over 25% to the cost of a new home. and developers pass this cost directly to customers. Speaking of taxes, in recent years, taxes and government regulations, often referred to as red tape, have increased. This is largely because the government is expanding at a faster rate than the population. For instance, the Fraser Institute report recorded that government sector job growth in Canada was 11.8% from February 2020 compared to just 3.3% for the private sector. Such rapid growth in government jobs means the government needs more money, which they get by increasing taxes. To make matters worse, the federal government has also been adding costs. Since 2015, it has increased its expenses by nearly $20 billion a year. This has contributed to making housing even less affordable. Nevertheless, housing isn't the only issue. The cost of everyday necessities has also skyrocketed. Since 2022, food prices in Canada have risen by over 10%, causing nearly 2 million Canadians to visit food banks in March 2023 alone, a record high, and double the number from 2019. One reason for the high food prices is the lack of competition among grocery stores. A few companies control almost 80% of the market, which allows them to keep prices high. The government has historically done little to prevent such consolidation in the food industry. Moreover, the government has policies that directly increase food prices. To put it into perspective, the government's system of supply management for dairy, eggs, and poultry restricts imports and allows domestic producers to maintain higher prices. This costs the average Canadian household an estimated extra $300 to $444 annually. Even if you can afford foodstuffs, how do you cook them when gas prices in Canada are outrageous? You see, the government introduced a carbon tax to reduce pollution, which has made gas and heating more expensive. Canadians now spend more on gas than any other G7 country. The carbon tax has been widely criticized, and citizens have voiced their dissatisfaction. In the Atlantic provinces, where residents rely on expensive and dirty fuel oil, the government had to drop the carbon tax to maintain support. While the government claims that rebates make up for the carbon tax, many Canadians remain unconvinced. As if that's not enough, the cost of wireless service in Canada is the highest in the world, 7 times more expensive than in Australia, and a staggering 1,000 times more expensive than in Finland. To make matters worse, the 4th largest player in the market, Shaw, was recently acquired by Rogers, the largest player. The government didn't step in to stop this. In many other countries, such a merger would likely be blocked or delayed to prevent monopolies. But in Canada, big corporations wield significant power and often get away with these anti-competitive deals. Banking in Canada faces similar issues. There's very little competition, and it's almost impossible for new banks to start up due to strict regulations that favor large, established entities. As a result, Canadians end up paying some of the highest banking fees in the developed world. On average, Canadians pay over $200 more per year in banking fees than people in the UK and Australia. This has also contributed to a rising level of money laundering in the country. Among all the OECD countries, Canada is the easiest place to launder money. A government-commissioned report confirmed that large amounts of black market money were being used to buy and sell properties in Canada. Despite this, the government has done little to combat money laundering, allowing it to continue unchecked. There are countless other examples why people don't want to live in Canada anymore, but the conclusion remains the same. Canada is a very expensive place to live in. One potential solution is to grow the economy and create high-paying jobs. However, Canada has struggled in this area. Statistics Canada reported that labor productivity of Canadian businesses fell by 1.8% in 2023, marking the 3rd consecutive annual decline. This decline was attributed to a 0.6% increase in real GDP, combined with a 2.5% increase in hours worked, indicating that productivity growth has slowed down. Globally, Canada's productivity has been trailing behind other G7 economies, including the United States, which saw a 6% surge in productivity over the same period. This decline in productivity is partly to blame for stagnant wages and a reduced quality of life in Canada. One reason for this decline is the lack of private sector investment. Canadian businesses are increasingly investing outside the country because they believe they can get better returns elsewhere, especially as they lose confidence in the current Canadian government, which is seen as unfriendly to businesses. Government intervention also plays a role. For instance, the energy sector in Canada has seen a major decline in investment due to federal policies that penalize the industry. Since 2015, energy investment has dropped by over $55 billion per year. While some might argue that oil and gas are industries of the past, the reality is that since 2017, the GDP growth from technology companies has only kept pace with inflation, meaning there hasn't been any real growth. Government efforts to incentivize industrial investment have largely failed. With high cost of living, limited housing opportunities, and rising financial pressures, it's no wonder people don't want to live in Canada anymore. But the question remains, will things change for the better? Or will more Canadians seek greener pastures elsewhere? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more insights into the economic and social trends shaping our world.